Welcome to this interview, or rather real conversation with a real person who is Helen Fletcher, and she is an energy healer. So thank you for coming today, Helen. And I'll just briefly introduce myself first. I am Natalia Kuna, and I'm also an energy healer as well as a psychic medium. And I'm currently building online courses, and I'm building an academy called Spiritual Academy. So that's something else that I do. And Helen has a very interesting kind of background. She came to Melbourne from England, and she actually first contacted me several years ago, and it was a bit interesting because she said she was looking up real estate on the internet, of all things. She somehow landed on my website, which is really funny to me because I've actually heard quite a few other people tell me similar stories. They'll be randomly Googling something and they somehow come across my site, as I'm sure that kind of happens to lots of people when they're in the synchronicitous flow. And also, when we spoke on the phone, I remember our phone call, and you did mention that a psychic beforehand had told you that you'll someday meet someone by the name of Natalia or something like that, and it'd be significant somehow. And when we were speaking on the phone, I remember it's just one of those things, I think, when people who are intuitive or have that sort of healing interest and so on tend to pick up on signals. So I remember feeling or seeing these horses run around you, and then you said at the time you lived near a race course. So they're just two things that I remember about when we first spoke. So Helen, would you like to speak on a little bit what drew you my way and when we first got to know each other?
Look, well, firstly, I just wanted to say thanks for inviting me to talk with you today, because as you said, we connected a few years ago, but this is actually the first time we've spoken face to face, so it's lovely to see you.
You too.
And yeah, well, it was funny. So I was Googling real estate, or, you know, furniture or something to do with the house, and your ad popped up saying Natalia Kuna, energy healer. And that was quite early on in my waking up to the world of energy and, you know, signs and synchronicities. So I thought, oh, you know, there's something significant here for me. And I think I emailed you or something and said, oh, something really funny just happened. And, you know, we've just sort of gone on from there. But yeah, I sort of, you know, I think if two people are meant to connect, then it's going to happen. And, you know, maybe sometimes the universe just goes, oh, let's have a bit of fun with this one, or, you know, because I've certainly had clients who found me in weird and wonderful ways too. So yeah, it's always interesting to hear the stories. So
yeah, no, it definitely does. And even as you're speaking, Helen, because this is the first time we've sort of met face to face, you know, your energy shines from you, it really radiates from you, and I can tell that you're a really loving person, and that you're this free spirit, right, in some way. and you know, like, you know, and we're all trapped by the world and society and all those things, but it really radiates from you. And I think that's the key when people are looking for healers or to work with somebody, perhaps get a reading, which we'll get into as well later, that to feel safe and to feel like you can trust the person, I always would recommend to people, just see how you feel by the person's energy, by their presence. And I think with you, you exude that you're genuine, you can see the light on you and within you, and it radiates. And that is the key for these days as well. So I just wanted to add that in. But let's talk about your sort of life in the early years, because you grew up in England, as I said before. And you lived in New Zealand for a bit, which I thought was interesting because I'm actually a Kiwi. I grew up in New Zealand. And then you finally moved here, like myself, to Melbourne in Australia. And when we were corresponding, you described your life as having sort of these two grand parts. There's sort of the pre-2012 Helen and the after 2012 Helen. And I also really relate to that as well, sort of two, you know, when you divide your life up into these grand kind of chapters, right? And then there's all these mini chapters in between. So why don't you tell us about your pre-2012 Helen, just briefly, your childhood in England, education, work background also, because Helen is a nurse, or she's been trained as a nurse. And, you know, I think that's really interesting that there are a certain number of healers also that started out in the medical fields and then branched out into healing. So I find that really interesting. And you did say that you always knew you'd be a nurse, and I love that. So why don't you go into a bit of that, your childhood and so on?
Sure. Yeah, look, there were definitely, it's almost like two distinct parts to my life, the pre-2012, and then events happened in 2012, and then, you know, there's the post phase, which I'm in now. So, you know, and pre-2012 was all about, you know, life was all about science and the physical world. And then after was all about, you know, energy and the non-physical. So very, you know, very different. But yeah, so as you said, I grew up in England, very happy childhood. I was, well, I am the youngest of 4 kids. I always knew I was going to be a nurse, like you said as well. Except for a really short period where I wanted to be an archaeologist. Because I studied Latin all the way through school and was fascinated by the Romans, but that didn't last long. So yeah, I just never wanted to do anything else except nursing. So I went up to London when I finished school and did my nursing training there. And after several years, went travelling and ended up in New Zealand. And it was there that I did some more study and specialised in intensive care nursing, which was fascinating. It, you know, intensive care was, as soon as I'd finished nursing, I knew I wanted to go into intensive care. So I did that for a few years in New Zealand, then moved to Melbourne and worked in one of the big Melbourne hospitals in an intensive care unit. And I'd only been there for a couple of years and just felt, you know, burned out. I thought, you know, I just didn't want to go to work. So I moved across to the operating theatres at the same hospital and specialised in the cardiothoracic theatres, which again was fascinating. It was, you know, they did all the normal open heart surgery, but they also had a heart-lung transplant program. So, you know, I got to see some amazing things. And then I probably did that for maybe 2 or 3 years. And then the last job I had before having my children was as a research nurse. So I was helping to run clinical trials. And some of them were just small in-house studies, you know, and some of them were national and some of them were, you know, major international trials. But the common factor was, you know, looking for where's the evidence, you know, so very sort of sciencey life really. And while I was doing that research job, that's when I met my husband, who's a doctor, and he was studying at the time. We actually spent a couple of years in England. He was studying at the time for his specialist exams. He's an anaesthetist. So I was doing a Master of Bioethics, because I just thought, well, you know, if he's studying, I may as well be studying. And I had my son in 2002 and my daughter in 2003. And as soon as they came along, I was a stay-at-home mum, which, you know, I've always said is the best job I've ever had. Mm-hmm. Loved it. So yeah, by 2012, we were back in Australia, living in Mornington, which is about 40 minutes outside of Melbourne. And we had a beautiful 10-acre property. 4 pet cows who were there to eat the grass and keep the place tidy, and a couple of little cats, and you know, it was me and the kids at home, and Tony sort of coming and going. He was working hard. So yeah, life was good. Very normal stay-at-home mum life.
I love that, because you know, it's great to go down to basics, and I really commend you for staying at home with your kids, and of course no judgment to anyone else's choices, but I really do strongly value that as well. It's very much the same, because you know, that is the most important job in the world. And I do feel that now, like women of our age, sort of when our kids are getting a little bit older, both of us have children who are sort of more in the teenage years, and you can start to branch out and figure out what it is you want to do, or sort of have some impact in their life, you know, apart from the fact that sometimes you just need to do a job just for money. But I thought it was interesting what you said prior about how you were interested in archaeology for a short amount of time, because it reminds me of interest that I used to have too. But it's funny that it was just something that seemed a bit mysterious, or a bit like unearthing ancient sort of secret knowledge or things like that. And I think that sort of fascination would be quite common for people who are sort of awakening or interested in the esoteric and all those things. And then you also mentioned just working in intensive care, and just the word intensive on its own, it made me think that sounds intense. And I know that yourself, as a sensitive person, as an empath, how did you deal with the intensity of working in theatres and intensive care, you know, caring for people who are going through, obviously, what you could describe as a trauma, or very difficult to be around those kind of situations. So how did that impact you?
Sorry, I'm just moving my
yeah.
my device.
No worries. When you're ready.
Because sorry.
Yeah, so being an empath, it can be really difficult just walking around this world as it is. It's difficult to even go to the supermarket sometimes. So how did you deal with it?
Well, I know exactly what you mean now, but you know, at that time, I don't think I realised I was an empath. Well, certainly not in the way we mean it now, or we understand it now. You know, that wasn't really in my vocabulary. But you know, as you said, it was a really intense job. It was full on day and night. You know, sometimes the nights were as busy as the days, because you're looking after these critically ill patients and their families. So yeah, I just realised that I got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. I was just, you know, well, I called it burnt out at the time. And I just needed to change. And maybe if I had the knowledge then that I've got now, you know, I'd recognise it as something different. Maybe I had been, you know, soaking up all that, you know, the grief and the fear and, you know, the anxiety from the relatives. The patients were, you know, often unconscious. So, you know, they were off in dreamland having whatever experiences they were having. But yeah, it was certainly really full on, exciting too. But, you know, I don't think we can exist at that, you know, a high level of stress and adrenaline for too long without it doing something. So, you know, I just had to move. And it's actually good that I did get to that burnout point, because then I went to theatre, and when I was in theatre, I met the guy who gave me the job of research nurse that has been so significant to me, you know, later on. And of course I met my husband. So, you know, none of that would have happened if I hadn't have, you know, things hadn't unfolded as they did.
No, absolutely. And I really know what you mean by burnout. And I think that a lot of people do get to the point that they get burnout, whether it's just in the particular job that they're doing, or just how we're expected to just work like robots. And, you know, a lot is asked for us really when it comes to working full time, especially and in certain industries. And I even remember when I first came to Melbourne, I was teaching English, and I felt burnout from that. Like there was at least a couple of weeknights a week after work where I would just have to crash at like 6:30 or something, because it was just too much. Yeah, it was like, and I think I was just like you don't understand that you're an empath back in those days, and you just, and it's, you have that awareness now. But I think it was just too much dealing with people, and it's exhausting doing certain jobs, like for me, teaching was. And I really wanted to pack it in, and I think a lot of people feel like that. And towards the end of our conversation, we'll go a bit into COVID-19. We'll just touch on that. But I think that that also connects to what's happening with people now in terms of they're realizing, you know what, I don't know if I can keep doing that job I was doing, or it's, how good is it to have a break from all that intensity and sort of robotic day-to-day action. So you talked about pre-2012. Let's go into after 2012. And funnily enough, 2012 is a bit of a big year out there, with the Mayan calendar thing. So I understand that you had a kind of cat miracle awakening moment. And I have to remind everybody that Helen, especially back in those days, very medical, trained as a nurse, high level education. And also, you also say that you were quite a skeptic, right, about anything woo-woo or healing or anything like that. So basically, just to introduce it, you had a kind of out of the blue awakening when your beloved cat, Mac, unfortunately had cancer. And at the time, after all these 15 years of professional, logical brained nurse background, you suddenly learnt a little bit about energy healing. So why don't you tell us your story about this and your research and what happened and the shift that occurred?
Yeah. Oh, look, I definitely was a massive skeptic of energy healing, although I did have a secret fascination with psychic mediums, good psychic mediums. I remember watching, there was a guy on telly, John Edward, an American guy, I don't know if you've seen him, he had a telly show, and I used to love watching his shows and just thinking, well, how does he know that stuff? It was just fascinating to me. But yes, I was absolutely catapulted, out of my, as you said, very logical, scientific world, because, one day I was a stay-at-home mum with these two little cats, and Mac was, I always felt a really strong affinity with him. The other cat, Pepper, was very much the kids' cat. He pretty much ignored me except for meal times. But Mac would, tend to hang around me a bit more. And one day when he was 4, he just got really unwell. He was clearly in a lot of pain. So we took him to the vet, and she, did a bunch of investigations and called us back in and told us that he had a huge tumour that was taking up a lot of space in the left side of his abdomen. And she could feel it when she felt his tummy, but also, we saw the x-ray and it was huge. And she said, unfortunately, this breed of cat at this age, it's quite not common, but it's a thing that can happen, that they get this particular aggressive cancer, and there's really nothing that can be done. So my husband had come to the vet with me too. I said, please come, we've got to get these results. So we brought Mac home with a whole bunch of painkillers, and she just said, just give him lots of love. And I was absolutely devastated because, this was Mac, my beautiful cat. And that night I was sitting with him on my lap. Tony had got called out to work. The kids were in bed. And I just thought, what can I do? And the thought came into my head that I should put my hands on him and just pour energy into him and dissolve this tumour. And so I was sitting there doing this, and Mac just fell asleep, and you know, he enjoyed it. It calmed him down. And as I was doing this, you know, huge visualization and just pouring love and energy into him, I was thinking, you know, get a grip. What are you doing? This is stupid. You know, this is all rubbish. But it just seemed like a good idea at the time. And then the next day he was in pain again. So I did it again. I was sitting on the bedroom floor, just, you know, doing the same thing again. And he curled up and fell asleep. And then a couple of days later, or a few days later, the vet rang to see how we were going. And I said to her, well, you know, he's absolutely fine. There's no pain. He's running around, playing, you know, eating and drinking normally. And she said, oh, that sounds a bit strange because, you know, he's got this huge tumour. So I took him back in, and when she examined him, there was no sign of the tumour. And I remember she was holding him for ages and feeling his tummy, and she said to me, you know, what have you done that thing should still be there? And I said, you know, I was a bit embarrassed. I thought, oh, I can't really, I don't know, I don't want to tell her. And I said, look, you know, I did this thing and I poured energy in, and I know it sounds crazy. And she said, well, you know, I don't believe in any of that stuff, but that's as good an explanation as any, because, you know, it's gone. So then that just set me on this whole path of, you know, what the hell happened? What did I do? You know, I need to find out more about this energy stuff. So I don't know, for anyone who's ever just Googled energy healing, there's just, you know, 5 million pages of all sorts of stuff. But, you know, I gradually sort of read my way through and was really drawn to Reiki. So I ended up studying that, and, you know, my life took off in a whole new direction.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just feeling into your words and what you're saying. And, you know, the fact that you could, as a nurse with that training, see the difference literally on whatever the x-ray or whatever the doctor was using there to, and just to actually have that confirmation. 1 minute there's a tumor, the next minute, boom, it's gone. Like, that is not expected at all. So I think for you then, you would be one of those people that maybe needed at that time that kind of proof for you to then turn and look at alternative ways of being and healing and so on. You know, and for other people it might be just, you know, we all sort of awaken and find these things in different ways. But that was your little story, and I know that you put that on your website, which is great, and I'll let everyone know your website details later. But when you share that cat miracle story, I noticed that you sort of added, important note, this experience of, you know, miracle healing is by no means what is to be expected by everyone or anyone that, you know, does a healing with me sort of thing. And I really understand that, because it is really important to have disclaimers when you're doing this kind of work, because we know just how miraculous and amazing and powerful it can be. And on the other hand, but everyone experiences differently and everyone's needs are different, whether it's a person or an animal. So for some people, they'll experience receiving a healing as, oh, that was nice. I just feel a bit calm, and relaxed, and you know, and for another person, it will be like, oh my God, that pain in my foot has gone. What have you done? My husband's now buying me roses or whatever, you know. So, you know, there really can be different experiences. And I think it comes down to, you know, a lot of the time, the person receiving and where they're at and what they need, or where you need to be as a healer as well. And that's sort of the spiritual, mysterious thing about everything, that it is important, as I know you do, to work with ethics, integrity, and to really let clients know what they can and can't expect. But then there's all those unknown areas because we don't know. So if someone writes into me, which I get, you know, I'm having all these medical issues, you know, if I get a healing with you, will it go away, sort of thing. And I will say straight away, look, I will not promise that I can remove any kind of pain or injury or whatever. And I don't believe in doing that. However, I can report to you X, Y, Z, and this is what happens. And it really is up to you. I'd hate to make a promise, you know. So how have you experienced your energy healing as benefiting your clients, and sort of how have they, what impact have they received from them? What are they reporting to you?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. My experience too has been, you know, there's a real scale of, you know, I feel so relaxed and I feel a lot lighter, to the, you know, I had a lady who a bone in her spine moved and her back pain disappeared. She'd had a car accident several years ago, which I knew nothing about. So, you know, it's just that sort of inexplicable end of the scale as well. But the first thing I say to new clients is just have no expectations, because I think if people come in with an idea of, I want this to happen, it may or it may not, and that is, you know, one of the mysteries, and also one of the really frustrating things about energy healing. Because we know so little about how it actually works. You know, we're not able to direct it to do particular things. You know, maybe we will be able to in the future, or maybe that's not what it's about. But I think if someone has a certain expectation, and they leave thinking, well, that pain's still there, so, you know, it didn't work. It could be that the thing that's underlying that pain is some emotional trauma that, you know, has been running lots of subconscious programs or whatever, or setting up beliefs. And that was what was actually needing to be healed in that session. So, you know, I always say to people, just be open, you know, and trust that you'll receive exactly the healing that you've come to receive, because something brought them there that day, whether it's what they think it is. You know, there's a reason they're there. So, yeah, it's good if they can just allow it to be what it's going to be.
Yes, completely. And actually, that made me think, have you ever dealt with a more skeptical type person, or anyone trying to test you? Because you were a former skeptic, so that would be interesting being on the other side.
Yeah, I do. Actually, one of my first clients that I had, I worked in a clinic for a while, and one of my first clients that I had there was a man who came in and sat down and said, my wife made me come, I don't believe in any of this stuff, so, you know, just let's get it over with, basically. And he actually ended up coming back 4 weeks in a row because, you know, his wife had made him come because he was stressed and grumpy. And yeah, he just, you know, was a real convert after the first session. But yeah, look, I totally get skeptics, because, you know, I was one of the biggest out there. You know, I had eye rolling down to a fine art. So yeah, I completely understand where they're coming from, and I'm still a little bit skeptical now, because just because I call myself an energy healer, it doesn't mean that, you know, and I believe in energy healing, it doesn't mean all energy healing or healers are, you know, have integrity and are doing it for the right reasons. So, you know, I think it's good to be skeptical. It's good to be healthy. And it also keeps me searching for answers, and, you know, that science part of me is still very much involved in my work. So, yeah, I like a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it is important when you're exploring the spiritual world, whether it's just for yourself personally or going to a psychic or healer, kind of what I mentioned before about sensing the light on you and feeling like you're someone to trust. It is important to have some discernment, because just because someone is claiming to be spiritual or doing any kind of service, whether it is a psychic reading, tarot reading, or a healing of any kind, or whatever, you know, not everybody is walking the path of light, unfortunately. And then for those who are walking the path of light, there's different factions, and, you know, and there are some people who are a little bit perhaps disillusioned or falling under something which is maybe not, you know, for the highest good. And so, you know, but I don't believe, very much like you, to sort of sit in fear either. You know, and to have a sense of trust as well. And it's just about peeling everything back and going back to simplicity. I think that from all the spiritual exploration for myself personally, it all just comes down to the basics. You know, it doesn't all need to be complicated. And so it's the same with intuition and trusting which healer or so on you're going to go to. Just trust. And as you said, be open. That's really important. I ask my clients to be really open to, especially for readings, but we'll get into that later. And, you know, and to have no expectations, I think that's a really good line to use. Just to simply come and be and open yourself up, and then, you know, and then allow that sort of magic to happen, right? Because spirit works in these amazing ways. And for us, we need to get out of our own way as practitioners. The client kind of needs to get out of their own way a little bit as well. So it's sort of a three-way street between spirit, client, and the practitioner. So yeah, we've talked a lot about about your human clients. Let's get a little bit into your little animal clients, because I know that you're an animal lover. It kind of exudes from you. It's part of your empathy. And you've had all these pets, including cows. And, you know, you had your experience with your cat. So how did you branch out from there into animal healing? Because I know that you worked for a vet, and you've also did some volunteering at a pound, which I think is amazing, and that touches my heart. And with that, you did receive a bit of feedback there that the animals who were quite aggressive before, was it dogs? Yeah, dogs were quite aggressive, and then after receiving your healing, they calmed down. So let us know about that more.
Yeah. No, it was amazing. So shortly after I did my 1 and 2 level Reiki training, I just went straight to the animals. I wasn't really interested in human Reiki at that point, because the lovely thing about animals is that they are so open, and they're all about, you know, feeling an instinct, and they seem to really be able to sense my intention to just offer them healing. So when I approached the rangers at the pound, you know, I just thought, oh, you know, there's so much stress. I could hear them. I could drive by it. Our local pound is right by the tip. So, you know, I could hear the dogs anytime I went to, you know, tip some green waste or recycling or whatever at the tip. I could hear the dogs yowling and barking, and, you know, it was just such a stressful place. So I thought I'd see if the rangers would let me go and sit there. And they were so open and just said, you know, yes, please, anything you can do. So one particular time I went, it was really funny. There was a dog in there who was very aggressive. I think he'd been horribly abused and had been brought in by the police. He was extremely aggressive, and they couldn't do anything with him. So the ranger said to me, can you please see if you can calm him down so that we can get in and clean his run. They had these sort of runs with cage doors at the front. So I wasn't able to go into his cage, but I just sat outside and started doing whatever it is I do. And I could see this dog in there just sitting staring at me, and gradually he moved forward, and after a few minutes he just lay down right up close to the gate and fell asleep. So I just sat there for a bit longer, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then the ranger came over and she said, you know, I wish I had a camera, because there were 4 or 5 cages all next to each other in a row, and at the door of every cage that a dog had come up and had fallen asleep. So there was just this row of animals, you know, these calm animals. And she said, it's so quiet, you know, it's not normally this quiet. And I just thought that was lovely, because they'd all sort of chosen to come and soak up this, you know, this beautiful energy, whatever was being offered to them, you know, they were accepting. But yeah, I also I worked at the vet for a little while, which was actually the vet practice, our local vet practice that I took Mac to initially. And the vet and I have become really good friends since Mac happened. She calls him Mac the Miracle Cat. And she said she always, whenever she has vet students come through the clinic to do, you know, some experience, she always shows them Mac's x-ray and tells them his story, just to say, you know, I didn't believe this stuff, but, you know, I saw it with my own eyes. So, you know, just keep an open mind. So that's lovely. But I did work there for a little while, and you know, animals are so wise. They're incredible. They know what they want. I've worked with some horses too, and I've heard stories about horses who oh, Mac's just here. He's just come to join in. That horses can turn themselves around if they've got a particular sore area. They turn into the hands of the healer to present that particular area. I had that experience myself, having read about it previously, which is amazing. But there was also a little dog that I saw at the vet practice whose owner brought him in because she was too scared to walk him because he was really aggressive. No, Mac. Sorry, he just wants to jump up.
No, it's fine. Let Mac in. We'd love to see Mac.
Here he is.
Oh my goodness, look at you. Aren't you gorgeous? And Mac is still around. It's like 2020 right now. That just shows overnight.
I know, that was 8 years ago. 8 years ago that he was not longer for the world. So he's still going strong.
Wow. There you go. Point.
Yeah, so this little dog was, you know, being really aggressive when the owner was taking him out for a walk. So she wanted to see if I could calm him down a bit. And as I was doing the healing on this little dog, as I was sitting with him, I just kept hearing back. And I said to her, oh, I've got cat hair in my mouth now. I said to her, you know, has your dog ever had trouble with his back? Because I just keep hearing the word back. And she said, oh, yes, he's had terrible trouble. He's had spine surgery and, you know, he's arthritic and he has a lot of pain. And anyway, she rang me a couple of weeks later and said, no difference with the aggression. She still couldn't take him out walking. But his back is great. She said he's moving a lot better. He's a lot more comfortable. So I think that he got what he wanted out of that healing. It didn't bother him that he was aggressive to other dogs. It was more about he actually wanted to have relief from his back pain from the healing. So yeah, I think animals are just wise, and you know, if only more people were able to be open to giving healing to their animals, because we can all do it. You know, I mean, it's energy, it's beautiful energy used for a healing intent. So, you know, if only people knew. We should teach this stuff in schools, you know, just offer healing energy. It's so powerful. It's beautiful.
you know, it's pure, real. And I was actually thinking about when you were talking about all the dogs who just sort of all, it made me think of in the pound how they just all went to sleep. It made me think they're like dominoes falling down. And it also made me think about, you know, being in a pound, there are caring people caring for them, and they've had previous trauma, a lot of them, or some of them. That made me think about the stress in the air transmitted between the dogs energetically. So even if they're in a better environment than maybe previously, and they're being fed and looked after on some level and taken for little walks and so on, their stress, that nervousness, the trauma is, as they're barking it out energetically, is just sort of catching between them. And then when you came into with the intention that day to heal and help that one dog at that moment, then like a domino effect. And that's all the, you know, a bunch of other dogs. And it's kind of like the idea of when you heal one person, when one person does a meditation and has come, it can have a ripple effect from there. And then when you mentioned that person who, I've forgotten what I was going to say now, doesn't matter. It was something I was going to add to that. All right, I'll think of it in a minute. But that idea of the peace and the calm, and how, oh, that's right, I know what it is now. When you said that if only you could, you know, everyone could do some healing on their animals, imagine that world. And then I thought, well, imagine the world when the humans were also doing the healing, and it's the humans and the animals, and the sense of calm, because that's really the main thing I feel from healing, is that sense of calm. And with animals, they really feel that and they love it. And so when you're doing your energy healing, whether it's on humans or animals, are you mostly hovering above the skin level, or do you sometimes actually touch the skin?
Well, usually my clients are covered up. You know, they'll have a blanket if it's chilly, or a sheet or something. I do touch their skin. I tend to sit, you know, I sit at their heads for varying lengths of time. So yeah, I do touch them. Usually when I start, it doesn't seem to make a difference if there's a covering on them, or if I'm actually touching them, or if I'm hovering, you know, my hands are hovering just above them. It doesn't seem to make a difference to the healing or to the information that comes, or any of that. It's more the intention of, you know, the healing that's meant to happen, that, you know, whatever's trying to come through, you know, and I'm just the conduit for whatever that is. You know, as all energy healers are, I think it's, you know, that also the client will draw whatever they're meant to receive from that healing. So does that answer your question?
No, absolutely. I mean, I was just curious because I know that, for example, when the kind of healing work I do is not, I don't have a table lying down, it's sitting up. It's more like healing, releasing, and different things. But I know that when you receive a healing from someone, when they're, so when a person's lying down, there is something about that touch, even if it's just, for example, touching the head or shoulders, which is common for healers like Reiki practitioners to do. There's something very comforting about it. And again, that's up to the level of the client, because obviously if they've undergone physical abuse, for example, they might be uncomfortable with that. But there's something so comforting, you know, to have someone just hold you. And because you're feeling the healing as well, you know, it can be really rewarding. When you're healing a cat, for example, and when I've gone to heal a cat, it's kind of funny at the beginning, because for example, if this is the cat hair and you just hovering over, they're going, hang on a minute, why aren't you touching me and scratching me? Like, bring your hand down already. So, because they're used to being like really physically touched. But then it doesn't take them long to all of a sudden be like, oh, this is all right. And then they get really calm and they love it, and then they can fall asleep easily. So the whole thing's really interesting. And animals are amazing to work with too. So how have you found society's views on healing in general? You've mentioned a little bit about it, such as the vet, who you kind of turned a little bit. Do you think it's more acceptable these days, or still not so much?
Look, yes, is the short answer. I think especially over the last 30 years or so, a lot more people have been, seeking complementary therapies, alternative therapies, and something like Reiki has become almost mainstream nowadays. There are Reiki practitioners everywhere, along with a whole bunch of other energy healing. It seems like Reiki is one of the most popular. And I remember reading an article a few years ago, and it was talking about Reiki in hospitals. And in 2010, there were over 600 hospitals and healthcare facilities in America that employed Reiki practitioners as part of their health program. And I know in the UK as well, there are Reiki practitioners employed in some of the NHS hospitals. So it certainly has become a lot more integrated into, not just society, but healthcare as well. And I think the fact that more and more people have been having it and noticing that symptoms and issues are improving or resolving altogether, that sort of caught the attention of the scientific community, which has then led to an absolute explosion into research into energy healing, which of course is, bringing the two great interests in my life together. So yeah, that's been fascinating for me to be able to read some really high quality research studies, because it's that sort of quiets the skeptical, logical part of me, my mind, and lets me know that, yeah, actually it is okay to keep doing what you're doing and doing energy healing. Because I know it works. I feel it in my heart that it works, and my intuition and all of that, but it's nice for my mind to know it too.
Yeah, totally. And that knowing aspect is a part of intuition that you grow into, because as a healer you grow into then opening up your intuition. You already mentioned briefly before how when you're working with an animal you got the word back, or and that's how it starts. That's your intuition. A little piece of information comes in. 1 minute you're just energy healing, and the next, hello, a word's coming in, or a phrase, and then that develops. So on your website, you actually talk a little bit about this idea of becoming psychic. So I just want to read something that's from your website. It says, as I began working with energy healing, my intuitive and psychic abilities quickly opened up, and my sessions are now a powerful blend of energy work and intuitive and psychic information. This combination beautifully guides people towards releasing whatever is blocking them from living a happy, healthy, and fulfilled life. So I really relate to that idea of the psychic information coming in. For me, also earlier on when I was just sort of learning about different things, and I studied to become an angel intuitive and so on. And I remember this time a bunch of us intuitives got together, and we were just sort of beginner level as well. And someone knew some Reiki, so she was just teaching us very sort of, casually. And I remember everyone was having a go at doing healing on. And when I went up to do it, I'm like, this is how it happens sometimes. Like sometimes something just suddenly happens out of nowhere. So I'm hovering over the body, the chakras going down. And then all of a sudden, getting information, kind of like what you said. It might be words, phrases, sentences, or just a depth of knowing, which is that intuitive faculty as well. And that I remember, when it first starts happening, you kind of spin out a bit. And then it happens more and more. The more you do, the more it comes. And before you know it, you evolve into actually being able to give intuitive psychic information. So I'd love to hear more about how that happened for you and how you grew into becoming psychic, because you also offer psychic readings, or you combine the two. Yeah, how did that work out for you?
Yeah, well, look, I don't do readings as such. It's all part of you know, as someone's having a healing, I get given information, and, you know, it's sort of, you know, the two go together. But certainly when I first learned Reiki, right, you know, right at the beginning when I started practicing on people, I was very much about, you know, the hand positions and trying to remember all of that. And, you know, and it's a confidence thing too, you know, the more you do it, the more confident you get. And after a while, you know, the hand positions just go out the window. And I, you know, now it's very much an intuitive thing. I can go anywhere. But yeah, when I started realizing that I was receiving psychic information, I was sort of a bit, I was really reticent to share it, because you know, some of it is really personal stuff. And I thought, I can't say that, you know, it's none of my business, you know. It's, I really didn't want to be saying to people, you know, the information that I was receiving. And then it just got louder and louder. You know, the more clients I did, it got louder and louder. And sort of over about probably a 4 or 6 week period, I went through this real process of, you know, you know, I can't say that, you know, I'm just going to ignore it, to I've got to say this because, you know, it's just so loud, you know, it's obviously there for a reason. So I remember that there was a lady I was working with, and I kind of knew her a bit, and she, you know, she was lovely. I mean, you know, all the clients are lovely. But I knew that she would be open to receiving this. So I said to her, do you mind if I share this stuff with you? And she said, you know, I haven't thought about that in years, or this information that came through. And it was really valuable to her. And that sort of taught me that it's not actually up to me to decide whether or not to share this stuff, because this, you know, she had things going on with her that she'd sort of buried and hadn't thought about, but they were affecting her now. So she needed to just address them and let them go. So that's what happened with her. And that really taught me to, you know, just trust that whatever I receive, it's not actually meant for me. It's meant for the client, for their benefit. You know, I'm here, you know, we're all here as, you know, in service to the people that we're working with. So, and that's part of the service, is to help them to realize what needs to be shifted, what's wanting to be shifted. So yeah, and now I love it. I love the psychic part of it, you know, because I've always had that, you know, how do they do that kind of you know, feeling about psychics. And I honestly believe that we're all psychic, and we're probably all receiving psychic messages. I had to learn what they sounded like, or what they felt like in my body. And now that I can recognize them, you know, it's clear as day when I'm receiving psychic information. But you know, and sometimes I say to my kids, you know, especially my 16-year-old daughter, I say, you know, don't forget I'm psychic, you know, I'm gonna know if you don't do what I've asked you to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mom. Yeah. No, it's a beautiful gift to have, that, you know, I really think anyone can develop in themselves if they want to. And obviously for the right intentions, not so you can spy on your neighbours or, you know, whatever. But yeah, and it is powerful. It's a powerful combination of the healing and
when we talk about powerful, it's like when I work with someone and we're working with their self-power. We're not talking about power like ego power here. It's an innate spiritual strength, and that's what's, and so when a healing can be powerful or a reading can be powerful, it is empowering the person and it's allowing them to see things more clearly and be more themselves in a stronger way. And that's what we mean by that. But I think when you're, that whole idea of receiving personal information, I know exactly what you mean, but I always say to clients, you know, if I receive something, it's for a reason. You know, for example, your ex from 1963 comes up, it must be something you're still holding on to, even on a subconscious level. So, you know, it's just allow it to be. Sometimes it's just a moment. Yep, okay, he was a bit abusive, let's just release that. So, you know, because people hold on to so much stuff. But receiving that personal information too, you learn after a while as a healer or a psychic to, you know, especially if we're working in this integrative way, how to deliver the information. And you can sense when perhaps a person is maybe not ready or wanting to go there. And that's okay too, you just have to respect that. But usually, you know, that's why letting them know, be open to the process, then they'll be open then to receiving that information. And ultimately, when you dig stuff up, it's, as you said, never, you know, always in a high integrity, you know, purposeful way. Ultimately, it's for the ultimate healing and therapy in the end. You know, and healing can often these days well, I'm not saying to replace a psychology session, you know, because we never want to get in the place of medical or psychology experts. But, you know, I do feel that spiritual psychic healing sessions can be so therapeutical and like therapy in some way. And that's sort of how it's shifted for us too, because we are in this new paradigm now in this post-2012 world where it is a bit different than what it used to be. When you used to go to a psychic, it was a whole different kind of picture, wasn't it? That idea of, you know, someone with a crystal ball and saying, you're going to marry a tall, dark, handsome man.
Yeah.
Have 3 kids and whatever. You know, it's different now. It's working on a higher level, and it's really, you know, we're accessing this light also that is here on this planet now and coming in, and everything is changing and evolving, and with that, so do we. So how did your confidence grow? Because I know that sometimes at the beginning or throughout the journey, we can have these big throws of confidence. And there's also that idea of, there's this term that's been going around, impostor syndrome, which just means, you know, when you're a bit scared to be out there and say you're an expert on something, even if you've been doing it and you know a lot and you've got no reason to, but often empathic people, caring people sort of suffer from this. So how did you overcome any feelings of not believing in yourself or anything like that?
Look, I think self-confidence has been an issue for me, you know, even before all of this. Certainly in my 20s, I was lacking in a really, you know, in being confident in who I was. And I was very much trying to be who I thought I should be, or who I thought the person that I was with at the time wanted me to be. And it was only really when I met my husband and he just allowed me to have my own opinions and, you know, that I was really able to grow into being comfortable in my own skin. And that's what allowed that awakening to happen when I finally got to the point where I was enough myself, that then the next big step could happen. But then again, when I started out as a healer, that was another huge crisis of confidence, because, you know, I was thinking, you know, I sort of had to come out of the spiritual closet and say, you know, hey everyone, I'm a healer. And, you know, I sort of thought, well, what are people going to think? Or what if I'm no good? What if I can't do this? And I remember the first time I got a little flyer made up saying, you know, Reiki. I had a really big Reiki and a really little Helen Fletcher underneath. And someone said to me, you should put your photo on there. And I thought, no way, what if someone I know saw it then they'd know that that was me doing, you know, this kooky stuff. So, you know, I had this real process of growing into, you know, ownership of this energy healing that I was absolutely compelled to do. And as I said before, you know, I was working in this clinic. I was invited to work in this beautiful allied health clinic. It was a chiropractic clinic just up the road from me, and that was a really safe place for me to you know, be a healer. You know, the clients would come and they were all the perfect clients at the perfect time. And, you know, I just really quickly grew in confidence and this really supportive environment of, you know, other healers and, you know, just wise people who sort of helped me to slowly, you know, step out. And by the time I left there, you know, I was really just happy to stand up and say, well, you know, I'm an energy healer and I give psychic guidance. You know, and I'm happy to say that now. I used to say, you know, several years ago, if I was at a dinner or something and someone would say, oh, what do you do? I'd say, oh, you know, I'm a housewife, or, you know, just something, you know, it's certainly not energy healer. But I think the biggest thing in terms of confidence for me was when I had the realization all of a sudden one day that, you know, I'm not actually doing the healing. It's, you know, it's coming through me. I'm sort of providing the, you know, pipe for the healing to flow through, or whatever. You know, whatever analogy you want to use, I thought, well, it's not actually down to any skill that I've got. So then I was really, you know, quickly able to let go of all the insecurity and the what if I'm not good enough and the fear of being seen, you know, all of that. It just sort of melted away.
Yeah, a lot of it is getting yourself out of the picture, and you learn to do that. And I think when I approach anything now, whether it's just getting on and doing a video, and, you know, especially as us sort of quiet introvert types, we're not extroverts. We don't love this stuff, but you follow spirit. And as soon as you put yourself out of the picture, and I'm here to be of service for others, that's your main intention, that's your focus. And then something happens then, and that's when the confidence can grow, and you just put yourself out of it. This is not about me here. Because, for example, even the intention for today is not just, you know, speak with wonderful you and share, you know, your knowledge and experience, but also to inspire people and to help them with you know, their confidence issues and so on. Because, you know, there's also, if there's anyone out there who's been thinking about opening up a business, or even studying Reiki, or trying to, you know, do a little bit of intuitive work or whatever, and, you know, it would be great to hear some recommendations you might be for that. But also a lot of people feel like people they know or other people out there do not understand, and there's a stigma involved in anything, you know, which anyone might consider a bit sort of, as you said, kooky or whatever. And that can really affect a person's confidence. Like, there's a lot of people that won't even go on Facebook, for example, or like a healing page in case, oh God, what if my, you know, my friend sees that I like this healing page. And so, you know, but that's changing for a lot of people at the moment as this light's coming in. So yeah, what can you share on that for people having confidence to start something and to go for it?
Oh, do you know, look, I mean, I certainly relate to all of the angst about, you know, what if people found out what I'm doing, you know, but it's really important to follow what your gut's telling you, what your heart's telling you, just whatever excites you, whatever feels good and true to you. Like, you know, energy healing, for example, I've got a handful of clients who are coming because they're trying to work towards being an energy healer and pulling themselves out of this kind of sticky, yucky environment that is holding them back. But it's really, you know, it's a decision. I think you get to the point, as you said, you know, you get more light in you, you raise your vibration enough so that you're able to realize it's just a choice. And if it's the right choice for you, then things are just going to flow. Doors will open, you'll be in the right place at the right time. You know, all those synchronicities will happen. But you know, I probably could have, I work at home now. I probably could have been working at home 6 months earlier than I did, but I stayed at the clinic because I thought that gave me credibility. You know, it's like I can say, oh yes, I work at this place. So, you know, it was sort of almost, you know, I wasn't able to fully just be empowered myself. But it was interesting that what happened, because I sort of felt maybe 6 months before I eventually left and started working fully from home, I thought, you know, I really should be going, but I'm not going to, I'm going to stay. And then what happened is that my clients just dried up. They got less and less each week until eventually I had no clients at the clinic for a couple of weeks. And I said to the boss, you know, the owner of the clinic, I really think it's time for me to go. You know, I've got no clients. This is a clear sign from the universe.
Yeah.
And so I set up, you know, I just set up at home. I got new business cards made, you know, all of that. And the day after I decided to just leave the clinic and set up at home, and I'd spoken to the owner and told her, I got 2 new clients booking in. And I said to my husband, oh, you know, it's a sign from the universe that, you know, this is the right thing for me. And he just went, yeah, sure, darling. Of course it is. But, you know, it was, and it's been lovely. It's been great. So, you know, it's really important for people just to follow their intuition. You know, and the more you delay, you sort of think, oh, yeah, because your mind's going to want to jump in and say, no, but you can't, because what if this, or, you know, what about the money? How you got to pay the bills, and you know, just you've got to be obviously, you know, you've got to think about the what's the word? You know, you can't just jump into it if it means you're not going to be able to put food on the table, but just taking baby steps. You know, the universe will always show you the way. So just trust if it really feels that's something that you want to do, because the world needs more energy healers. You know, there's a lot of healing that's happening at a very fast rate at the moment, and people are changing and ascending quickly now. It's a really special time on the planet. So yeah, anyone who is feeling drawn to being an energy healer, I say go for it.
Yeah, 100%. And you're really right about the baby steps. And they're actually words that the angels have often given me. And I'll see, they'll show, for example, oh, Helen, your screen's just off. Just turn on your stop video. Yeah, there you go. So the angels have given me, for example, an image of a stepping stone in a pond, and then which is lit up, like kind of like a Japanese pond, and then in the distance there's the other stepping stones, but the first one's lit up first, and that's the big one. And the message in that is just to go, whatever that first thing is, go on that first step, and then do whatever happens and follow your signs and synchronicities, and then the next little step will be lit up, and it's one upon the other upon the other. And you have to just start somewhere. So I remember, you know, for years I was like so into the angel cards, and I would be so drawn to them everywhere, and angels. And I have friends that even from back like 15, 20 years ago would be like, remember how you took your oracle cards to Croatia on a trip? And I'm like, no, I didn't even remember. But then at some point, I remember when you mentioned your husband, it kind of made me laugh because they kind of are our grounding kind of poles. And, you know, to sort of, and so before I'd even done any of this stuff, I just had my little oracle cards or whatever, and we had all these people over. And then my husband said, we're at the table, he just said out of nowhere, why don't you do a reading for someone? I was like, what? No way, like freak out straight away. There's no way. I just do this quietly myself, whatever, you know, maybe with a friend personally or something. Totally put me on the spot. And I ended up doing it. And that's where it started, where I actually thought, oh, maybe I can eventually do something with this. And but you just go, you never think it's going to be that you end up being, for example, a healer and be able to give psychic readings. It just starts somewhere, one step at a time. And so for people who want to, you know, follow your urges, as you said, and also, you know, take it one step at a time and practice, just practice, but don't over practice. Because I remember when I first started, I remember when I had on my website, okay, I've published it now that someone can purchase a reading from me. And then, you know, when the first person booked, I freaked out. I freaked out. Freaked out. Like I had heart palpitations. And then when the first person came to my home for a session, I delayed them for 2 weeks. And I made it a Friday. And I made it a Friday because even though it was available before then, because I was that freaked out. So that's how it is when you start. But then over time, you just get used to it and you breathe through it and you get through it and you just grow as you go along. So definitely trust, like you said, trust in your gut and what's coming to you. One of the other things, as you kind of mentioned, is we do tend to overstudy. Like I used to think I need all these certificates to prove myself. It doesn't matter that I've got, you know, like bachelor's, you know, degree and all these other things, like youth and nursing backgrounds. They're different industries, but, you know, it's just funny that we just feel like I can't give a session unless someone sees that I've got this or this or that. And after you do 1, 2, 3 things, you think you need more. It's just put it all out of the way. Nobody cares. Not one person has asked to see my certificate. Nobody cares. They just want to know that you're good at what you do, roughly, at least on a basic level, and just, you know, go from there. So we need to get past it. And this is all versions of imposter syndrome, you know. But also, after a while, so for example, you became more intuitive and you started to incorporate that in your sessions. There's also that element of changing. You said, for example, with the Reiki, you stop just going, okay, like 3 minutes here. All right, is the timer gone off? Good, now I'm going to go to this spot of the body. And that kind of makes you very robotic and we all start somewhere, and that's how it is at the beginning. Or it's like you have your folder of notes. And then it's just like you just go for it and you go wherever you need to go and you just trust in the process. So did you get into any other healing modalities, and how did you kind of metamorphosize into just doing your own thing?
Sorry, I'm just going to have a cough.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, well, certainly for me at the beginning, it was really important to go off and study Reiki or study energy healing, because it was like learning a whole new language. You know, I had no clue how to do, you know, whatever I'd done with Mac. I didn't know what that was. So the fact that I was able to study and learn about energy and how we can offer that to another person or animal was really important for me. And I did do one more course, I think, to do with crystals, because, you know, I've started to find crystals quite fascinating, because they're just really sort of little packets of this beautiful, pure energy, and just about how they can be used in healing. And occasionally I'll, you know, bring out a crystal in a healing, or, you know, if I feel drawn to, but it was just really more for my information that I did the crystal course. But I sort of feel now that I've read about a lot of other healing modalities, like, you know, reconnective healing, therapeutic touch, you know, all very powerful in their own right, but I haven't felt the need to study anything else because it struck me one day that all the different healing modalities have a common factor, which is the healing intention. So I feel at the moment that I'm just happy doing what I'm doing and offering, my own form of healing that's sort of, it's almost like it's got a life of its own. It's sort of growing and evolving, almost with every client. It's sort of, something different will come in, or I'll do something slightly different and I'll learn something. So I'm sort of at the moment doing my own learning, or perhaps spirit's teaching me, or whatever, however you like to say. I just feel like I'm okay at the moment. That's not to say I won't go off and learn some more, and I highly encourage people, if they're new to energy healing, to certainly see what you're drawn to and do that. I think for people who do lots and lots of courses, and as you said, needing to have lots of certificates to say I really am a good healer, that's more that's that confidence thing that we were talking about before. And it's really, it's not a bad thing at all to have done lots of study and lots of different techniques and whatnot, but just, I think people need to inquire of themselves why they need to have all those certificates and all those courses. And if it's because you're genuinely interested in all those different things, then great, go for it. But if you realize that it's actually fear of not being good enough, or just a lack of confidence, then that's what you need to address, rather than just piling more knowledge on top of your, already bursting repertoire.
Yeah, totally. I love that. I think that's really great advice. And, to allow that to sink in to people, because, how much longer can we sort of go on not believing in ourselves and not having confidence? Like, something has to turn at some point, right? Or you're just going to keep being under that rock. And we both know what it's like to want the blankets on us and kind of hide from the world as well. And that's sort of been a part of it, isn't it? Like, I know that I think we both had a little bit of that syndrome of dimming our lights before, or in certain situations around certain people. And really our light was a lot brighter always. It's just that we hid it, or the world wasn't ready for it, or it was too hard to deal with the repercussions of showing that light, or for different reasons. But you being an open vessel and allowing spirit to come through you, it's that sign of the evolved healer or practitioner, and whatever that you're giving to people. Being that open vessel just allows that spirit to come in. And I know that for many of us who've been doing it for a little while, you get to that point that spirit does give you direct techniques as well, and things to do, or guide you to an area, which is really interesting. So for example, I've had spirit come through and show me just little different technique things as I'm doing the energy healer. My hands will start to just do stuff on their own. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going, okay, hand, go here. Something else is just coming through. And then, other things have happened, such as a kind of version of, for lack of a better word, I'll just call it psychic surgery. That's actually probably a whole thing of it on its own. But a very simple example is spirit coming through and saying, for example, to sew up something energetically, right? So and different things. So how has spirit come through you to show you, for example, a specific technique, or go to a certain area of the body? How is that manifested for you? Could you give an example or two?
Look, I think you call it spirit, and I call it intuition. It's all the same thing, really. It's guidance wherever it's coming from. And yeah, look, I don't know if I've ever really thought about whether, you know, what's causing all of my sessions to be different from the other one. I just sort of, you know, I tend to nowadays just almost float along, a little bit meditative, you know, and before I know it, the session's over. So yeah, I think maybe I am being guided by spirit. I'm not aware that I've particularly learned anything that I continue on. I've started to get, probably in the last year or 18 months, a lot of pictures, a lot of visual images, and some of them are quite specific to that person, or I'll see, you know, a particular figure, like a figure of a man, and I'll describe that to the client, and, you know, this actually happened. She said, oh, that's my son who died. You know, or sometimes it'll be more of a metaphor, like, you know, I'll see someone in a box and another person putting a lid on them, you know, that sort of thing. So you know, I don't know where they're coming from. I should ask one day, you know, who's giving me this information. That would be really interesting. I've always assumed it's their higher selves, or their guides, or soul family, or, you know, whoever's there helping them. But yeah, I just think, you know, as you said, you know, being open, you know, we're open vessels, and just going with the flow, and not trying to control, you know, not trying to want healing for that person in a particular way. You know, if someone comes with, you know, a terrible rheumatoid arthritis pain or something, you know, it would be lovely if their pain was relieved, but if their higher selves have got a different outcome for them, then, you know, just letting that be okay. But I think I'll start watching now. I'll start sort of paying a bit more conscious attention, and just seeing and asking if I can be shown different things, because that's lovely that you know, that you're told, almost you're guided to do different things, do certain things. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is when it happens, and it's just following the intuition, because, you know, sometimes sessions can be pretty like much of a muchness, and then every now and again something new comes up, new and exciting. Or even, I call it, as you mentioned, those pictures that you get. I really relate to that. It could be metaphoric, as you said. You know, get a lot of those as well. But then sometimes, once I've received it once, sometimes it's very unique for that client. That's their image, not going to ever come up again. And at other times I'm like, oh, thanks for that. That's awesome, because if it comes up again, I'll know exactly what it means, right? So, you know, so one, for example, that I would get is, I see a picture of a woman with long fingernails, and that is my sign of, in this particular way, long, really long, sort of pointy red nails. It's my sign of a manipulator, right? And it's not saying anything about everyone with long fingernails. It's just that's my particular sign. And I'll often say it could mean that that person actually has long fingernails, but otherwise it's my sign for someone who's manipulative. And sometimes it's been both. So it really is the, you know, after a while you get used to how the information comes to you. Sometimes you don't know, is it literal or is it real? You know, but I was always taught, say what you get, no matter how odd it sounds. So an example is, you know, they say, for example, if you just get an odd word and you're like, I don't want to say that word, that's so embarrassing. You know, why am I going to say jelly beans? I heard jelly beans. You know, they're going to think nuts. So, but, you know, it could just well be that, oh my God, my grandmother used to have a container filled with jelly beans, and that was our thing, you know, and so you just have to trust it. And I've definitely had moments where I'm like, oh, should I say this? Oh God, you know, but you do get used to it, and you do, you know what, I'm going to say it. Just going to say it, and that's it. So for example, with the client, we're talking about other stuff, and all of a sudden, and she's talking about her new boyfriend, and I just see this frog jumping along. And I'm like, I'm not going to mention this frog. Oh God. I don't know why, but around your boyfriend, I just keep seeing the frog. And then she was like, oh, he's a frog biologist. So I was like, okay. So when that happens, you're like, okay, I'm going to trust it. It is what it is. And, you know, if you're wrong, you're wrong. That's okay. No, we're not meant to be 100% accurate, by the way. Like, many of us have a pretty good amount of accuracy, but we can be wrong, or, you know, we might misread things. And I think it's important not to interpret them directly and allow the person to interpret that, because, so for example, another example, and I'd like to hear one of yours, is I received apples and oranges, right? So this is earlier on. So I went to interpret it. So I received apple and oranges, and, you know, this is a bit dumb, but all right, I'm just going to say, have you been eating a lot of fruit lately? And they're like, oh, you know, not so much. I go, oh, okay, that's cool. I just kept hearing apples and oranges, and we'd been on the topic of their grandmother who had passed away. She was like, oh, my grandmother used to sing this song, Apples and Oranges. But of course, I'd never heard that song. I didn't even know anything about it. And she started crying, and she knew that was her link with her grandmother. But that's just an example of, you know, just you receive it, just give it. Have you had examples like that?
For sure. Yeah. Actually, it's funny because I was thinking when you were saying that you were seeing this picture of a frog when she was about her boyfriend, what that meant to me in my mind was, you know, the prince and the frog's no good. So, you know, he was a no good boyfriend, but actually it turns out he was probably fine. He was just working with frogs. So yeah, I think the example that springs to mind is a little while ago I had a lady and I saw a millstone, you know, like this big heavy stone with a hole in the middle. And I thought millstone, you know, millstone around her neck. And, you know, so I said to her, I've seen a millstone, and, you know, and it meant to me, just, you know, my thought behind it was someone's, you know, weighing you down, or situations weighing you down, you know, you need to have a think. And I said, you know, what do millstones mean to you? I've seen this millstone. And she said, oh, well, I'm a stone collector. I love stones. I'd love to find a millstone, you know, a genuine one. And I thought, well, you know, who collects stones apart from this lady, you know, and God love her, it's her passion. She's got hundreds. But, you know, you're absolutely right. It's not our information. It's, you know, it comes through us, but, you know, it's meant for them. So it's whatever these metaphors and analogies and pictures mean to them is you know, what's true.
Yeah, and it's
really, I guess
often it's a validation, especially when it comes to mediumship. Once they've heard that, they're like, okay, I'm trusting in this process, and they do their little cry or whatever, and they've had their release, and then they walk away happy, you know, they've got that. And it's a validation too, you know, that that you are indeed connecting with them, or with their, whatever you want to call it, their peeps on the other side. So one of the things that you've talked about with me previously is your interest in human consciousness. So I'm really curious what you have to say about that, like the power of intention and thoughts.
Yeah, look, there's a whole area of study, of scientific study now, that's looking at human consciousness and the power of our thoughts. And I first became interested in this area when I found a little book a few years ago by a Japanese researcher called Dr. Masaru Emoto, The Hidden Messages in Water. I can see you've heard of it too. And it's all about how our thoughts and words can actually change the molecular structure of water to make it more pure, or, you know, by giving it loving, positive words and thoughts, or, you know, more chaotic. The molecules are just chaotic and disorganized. But, you know, if you send negative, hateful words to these beakers of water that he was using in his research. And I thought that was so powerful, because if you consider that human beings, you know, the average adult human is around 70% water, and kids are more than that, and babies are even more. They're around about 80, 85. So if you consider what your words are doing to the water molecules in, you know, that person's body who you're angry with, or, you know, even thinking angry thoughts to, you know, it's or, you know, even to yourself, thinking, you know, self-hating thoughts. It's powerful stuff. But, you know, his work was so groundbreaking, and that book was published in 2001, and since then there has been a whole ton of really rigorous scientific research looking at the fact that our thoughts have an energy that doesn't stay inside our heads. It actually leaves our mind somehow and is received by whatever it is that you're thinking about. So I was reading this research paper a little while ago, written by a guy from Stanford University, and he was saying that every thought we have is a tangible energy that has the power to transform matter. So, you know, this is amazing because, you know, they've researched the fact that thoughts have this electromagnetic energy, and which is received by things in the outside world. So this, you know, made me think of the law of attraction. You know, maybe that could start to explain why that works. If you're thinking about something in particular and wanting to attract it to you, maybe, you know, the energy of those thoughts is literally drawing that thing towards you. Or, you know, it could explain why affirmations work, you know, that positive thinking. But there are actually two that I know of, two institutes set up solely to research the power of human consciousness and the power of our thoughts and energy healing. And one of them's the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and noetic is just, you know, human consciousness. So the study of that, and there's another one called the Consciousness and Healing Institute, and they're both in America. And they're both carrying out incredible research, just looking into energy healing and all, you know, the human consciousness stuff, how that affects things outside of us. So, you know, I'm really excited to see where that research goes, because it's the key to demystifying energy healing and taking it out of the realm of, you know, the hippie, kooky, you know, mystic, into the realm of science, which is, you know, where we're headed. It's quantum level inquiry. So I don't pretend to understand any of it really, but, you know, it's certainly really exciting. And I think the next sort of 10 to 50 years are going to see huge advances in explaining why energy healing works, because we both know it does. You know, so it'll be lovely to have some science behind it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and it just sounds like the kind of progress. It really is progression and evolution, isn't it? Human consciousness. I mean, the ancient consciousness, we somehow got lost along the way, and now it's re-arising, because we're in this time of awakening, really, and some of us are really in tune with it, and hopping on board and feeling it. Others not so much. It's all good. Everyone's at their own pace. But I think that once science does start to come out with these things more on a mainstream level, then the people that are a little bit more skeptic or unsure, or sort of just don't even have time for it, would be more open to see, oh, okay, yeah, you know, it's just like understanding how the brain works. We only understand a very small amount of how much our brain, you know, what's happening in our brains. But this whole awakening thing, it'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on what is awakening, you know, what are the symptoms that, you know, you can go through, good and bad, and how does awakening impact a family, or even just like your marriage, relationship with a husband, especially, you know, for example, your husband's a doctor, and your children. Yeah, so yeah, let us know You've experienced all of that.
Yeah, I think on a general level, awakening is, you know, just the awareness of something bigger inside yourself, as well as, you know, the awareness of God or source or universe or whatever you want to call that greater energy. And it usually sets people off on a path of change and needing to search for answers. An awakening can look different for everybody. For some people, it's just a gentle, gradual process of, you know, learning lessons, gaining insights. And for other people, it's, you know, a real hit between the eyes. You know, which is, I'm more that end of the spectrum, I think. You know, I certainly had this real sudden event that changed everything for me. And not only did it start me seeking energy healing, I also really felt the need to start meditating and doing a bit of self-inquiry, because that's another feature of awakening is, you know, this search for answers. What feels true to you? What do you really want? You know, and it can be quite threatening to some people because, you know, some people realize that actually, you know, I don't want to be married to this person. I'm not happy. I'm just settling because it's safe and it's easy. Or, you know, I don't want to live in this city, or I don't want to have this job, or, you know, whatever. It can be a catalyst for huge change, which is scary for some people, because, you know, we like to be safe and secure, but ultimately it's all going to be for our benefit. And I was really fortunate, because when I went through that self-inquiry process, I realized that I really loved my husband. Yay! And, you know, that I'm in the right place doing, you know, what I came here to do. I really feel that now. And I realized that before I had this underlying discontent and, you know, this unsettled feeling, like something was missing. And that's what I'm hearing from a lot of clients. And maybe, you know, you can relate to that too. A lot of people are just feeling, you know, like something's not right. Yeah. But, you know, I think also my personal awakening, it was quite a lonely time for me, because when I started off on this whole other direction, I didn't know anyone who, you know, knew anything about this stuff. So I actually ended up going into a bit of a cocoon for probably 2 or 3 years, just doing lots of meditating, lots of learning. I stopped seeing almost everyone in my friendship group because, you know, we just didn't match anymore. I was changing, and that was certainly very tricky for my family, because one day I was, you know, normal Helen, normal mum, and then the next day, you know, I've suddenly become spiritual and I'm meditating and talking about energy and chakras and stuff like that. So, you know, my husband has been an absolute star, an angel. You know, he is very open about the fact he still doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And I say to him, well, how do you explain Mac? And he's like, well, I can't, but I don't believe in it, you know. So, but he, you know, he just wants me to be happy. So he's been so supportive and saying, yes, darling, you can go and do that course, or, you know, you can go to that talk all day Saturday, I'll look after the kids, or, you know, whatever. Over the years, he's been great. And we've sort of all grown together as a family. You know, I think, like you said, you know, we all have this energy field, and as I've been sort of changing and rising, it's sort of, you know, they've been caught up in the vortex as well, and you know, so they're probably changing more than they know. But you know, my kids think it's just quite funny. My daughter says, you know, we've got sciencey dad and, you know, hippy dippy mum. You know, they sort of think it's all a bit strange and weird, but you know, I just feel really accepted, and you know, they're happy for me to go off and do my thing, as long as I don't talk to them too much about it. But you know, it's been great. But yeah, look, it certainly is. You know, it's a process that never ends. It's just, you know, probably from lifetime to lifetime. You know, we're just constantly awakening. And you know, one thing I would say to people is try not to resist it, because it's just going to keep coming at you, and it's ultimately for all of our benefit. You know, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful once you release that resistance and just go with the flow. You know, life just unfolds in the most incredible, unimaginable, crazy ways. You know, and if someone had said to me that 20 years ago, this is what I'd be doing in 20 years, I'd have been horrified. But, you know, I just thank God that, you know, everything happened as it did, because I love my life. I wouldn't change a thing about it, really.
Wow, that sounds perfect. Sounds like you're really in the flow and you're right where you need to be. And there's a peace about that, isn't it? A sense of peacefulness. No matter what,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no matter what's going on in the world, you've got that center, and you can always come back to it when things get a bit tough, you know, as they do. Nothing's perfect, because I think some people might mistake the idea of once you awaken and all of this, everything's just going to be all roses. It's not. There's plenty of thorns along the way. You know, we go through things like restlessness, chaos. You know, it can be isolating. You can feel like you're going nuts. And that's always a bit of a joke with everything. And you know, it's, as you say, you really have to go with it, because the more resistance you put in, the more challenges come your way, and then it's like a big volcano that just needs to erupt. So do you want to learn the easy way or the hard way? And like, you know, we learnt the hard way plenty. So I know what that's like. And you know, and now we're living in these corona times at the moment, and so yeah, it'd be interesting just to hear how you've been experiencing it yourself, and what your thoughts and reflections are, especially in terms of the more idea of consciousness, and how this is really creating actually quite a shift, and as a catalyst for major change in the world. There's a lot of things going on at once. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, you know, just this pandemic is such a global event. It's affecting everyone on the planet at the same time. And, you know, I'm not sure if there's been anything in human history that's really been so far reaching, you know, all at the same time. We're certainly, you know, we're in a time of transition on the planet. You know, so you mentioned earlier on about the end of the Mayan calendar, you know, and 2012 being a big year. You know, we're moving into the age of Aquarius, the golden age, you know, whatever you like to call it. You know, Eckhart Tolle calls it the new earth. So, but the thing is, we're currently in the old paradigm. We're in the 3D world where, you know, we experience struggle and limitation and fear, and, you know, this us and them mentality. But we're moving to this, you know, the golden age of 5D consciousness, where there's ease and flow and synchronicity and miracle consciousness. So that's what we're heading towards. But to get from here to there, we need to go through this really turbulent, kind of volatile time of change. There's so much that has to change on a huge scale. And if it's interesting, if you look back over the last few years, it's actually been happening quite a long time, with things like what's certainly very topical at the moment, even in the last few days, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, bringing awareness of racism. Things like, you know, the Me Too movement that, you know, calling out the treatment of women, and this really male-dominated society. You know, we're moving towards the divine feminine model of living. But also, you know, there's been the exposure of the global paedophile and sex trafficking networks, which I know is a cause that you're, you know, very aware of and involved in to some extent. So, you know, that there's been a lot of things that people have started to stand up and say, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live in a world like this. So I think that this coronavirus is another big step along this path of, you know, massive change in the way that we exist together. And it's bringing up all sorts of issues to be looked at and addressed, certainly in the political sphere, as we've seen, you know, certainly in America particularly, that's been all over the news. But it's also providing an opportunity for doing things in a new way. You know, but people are learning different ways of working, but also, you know, the collaboration of scientists that's never happened before to find a vaccine. You know, they're sharing information in a way that's never been done before, because it's always been a very competitive market. So, you know, I think ultimately this is all happening for... So yeah, look, it's happening for us, and it's taking us to this new beautiful world, which I think is ours quite soon if we choose it. So, you know, I say to my kids that, you know, this is such an exciting time to be alive. It's scary too if we allow ourselves to be pulled down into that. But, you know, there's such great change happening so quickly. That I think, you know, if we stay positive and keep our vibration high, you know, it's going to speed this transition process and make it a lot smoother, hopefully.
Absolutely. It's sort of, on one hand, it's a matter of time, and then on the other, there's this acceleration of time. So, you know, with this energy that's been coming in, things are speeding up, and so many of us are saying, you know, like 1 minute life was normal, or as it was, and all of a sudden it's like sliding doors and then this whole other reality has appeared, and all of a sudden here we are, and then there's this grand feeling of pause, and then all the chaos, and as you said, that civil unrest is happening right now, and that will continue to happen. The unrest is because people don't feel restful. There's a restlessness underneath everyone's bones, and they'll have their own individual stuff, and then there's the global stuff. And I remember even thinking from the early years when when I was a child or younger, why are there, you know, these rich people over here that also like meanies? You know, this is just a simplified version, obviously. And it's like even in the fairy tales. And then you have Cinderella, you know, and then you have, why are there these children that are starving and can't even have, you know, they have a bowl of rice every day? And so now I think that the people standing up and doing their bit, if everyone were to do their bit, this is why too, let's just get rid of all the issues and facades and confidence issues. Just, you know what, it's not worth it. There are people starving in the world. There are, you mentioned the child trafficking and all that stuff. It's something I'm like really passionate about, and just, it just really affects me. There, you know, there's so many truths that are either not known or that are starting to become known, and really believe that the rug from under us is being shaked up and in some cases removed or completely. And it's the only way that we can create a change, because unfortunately, you know, we're living in this money system, and, you know, I've always said, I really don't care if there is an economy crash. This is just my own personal view. I'm sorry for anyone who maybe has some stocks or whatever. My view is I'd love the whole system just to come crumbling down so that everyone can be a little bit more you know, in touch with reality and do something for those who, you know, who are hungry and cannot eat, so that there's more balance in the world, because it's so out. And how can we ignore this? Who cares if, oh my God, a millionaire lost, you know, 100,000 of stocks, when there's a child who, you know, is being abused even, or can't eat and is on the streets collecting rubbish, you know. So everyone has their own thing they're interested in, or that they might have a little talent in, or just whatever. But even speaking up and creating that awareness is a start in many cases, and it's like a little seed of light that opens up. And if we all just start opening up all across the globe, then it's like this beautiful picture of stars opening up. And if that one person goes, okay, you know what, I'm going to smile at that lady at the supermarket who looks a bit depressed, and another person's like, I'm going to donate $50 to the child trafficking thing, and another person's like, I'm going to stand up as a doctor and say, no, that's not okay, and whatever, then, you know, slowly change is activated. Because it's easy just to say, oh, you know what, change is never going to happen, because it's easy to think that, because it's too hard, there's too many things. That's what it's about. Each little individual, or as many units of people or groups of people and communities coming together, and that's when change really can be activated. And then amongst all of that, we have this light coming in, and that's just sort of peeling back all the layers. And when the light comes in, all the little niggly dark creatures and start to scatter around and come out from under the rocks. And that's really what it's like. And this light is shining in, shining in, shining in, and it's creating an eruption. But it's needed. That unrest is needed to create the change. And so I too am excited about these times. And, you know, all we can do is do our bit, you know, and keep that hope and that faith, because really that is the flame that keeps us going, you know. Do you have anything more you'd like to add to that, or any sort of last words before we close off?
Oh, look, I think, you know, I 100% agree with you that, you know, each of us can do our own little bit by just being authentic, seeing what feels true to you. And, you know, it's the easiest way to get through this is just, you know, try and keep your vibration high, look after yourself, and, you know, look after other people, you know, but focusing on your own frequency is going to shift us as a whole through this process a lot quicker. And don't be scared. You know, there's ultimately nothing to be scared of. I mean, if, you know, we're thinking about catching the virus, or, you know, all the stuff that's going on in America, that can drag us down. But you know, try sending love to all the people on that news show that you're looking at, you know, to try and lift them out of their, you know, horrible situation that you're in. There's always a little something that we can do, but just trust that it's all happening for us, and that it's going to be a beautiful new world. That's what we're heading towards.
Yeah, we're excited about it. And I love that you use the word simplicity and truth, being true. I think that's what, you know, that's what this time is coming down to at the moment too. More of us individuals are we're feeling that calling. So many people are like, I feel a calling, but I don't know quite what it is, or you know, something is guiding me to something. And for other people, it's like coming into their truth, into their authenticity, and becoming more of who they really are, that was either hidden or pushed down, or for whatever reason. And it's time to rise up and come out. So if there's anything that you can get out of this, guys that are watching, you know, just don't be afraid, you know, and write in, tell us your experiences, and you know, let us know as well, because we're all here for each other, right? And, you know, I'd like to close off by reading a testimonial that somebody wrote on your website. So I've written it down here. It says, Helen is a beautiful, kind, warm, and caring person. And I think that just shines from you. With her incredible insights, skills and guidance, I went on an amazing journey reflecting on my health, personal relationships, and life challenges that were weighing me down. I really, there's more to it, but I just want to pause there and say, I know that feeling of clients feeling weighed down, all the life challenges that come up, and just so many things, you know, often after a session, it's just like a whole weight has lifted off them. There's that lightness that they can feel. And it says, Helen assisted me to find new ways, insights to trauma, and amazing new approaches so I could move forward into living a life that I've always strived for. And more importantly, feeling the joy and happiness within. That's so nice and it's so uplifting. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. Would you like to share, if you have any last minute quotes or anything you'd like to say, otherwise just share with us your website details, how to contact you and so on.
I absolutely can't think of a quote.
Don't worry.
I remember yeah, my website is www.helenfletcher.net. Helen Fletcher, all one word, and that's just, you know, got more information about me and how I work. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to chat. It's been wonderful.
You're welcome so much. I'm going to place the details of your website under this video, as well as information about myself as well, so for both of us. So thank you, Helen, for sharing so deeply, warmly, and you know, we had a bit of a laugh along the way, so that's been great. And you know, everyone who's listening, just want to say thank you. Rise on, shine on, and check out the links under the video. And, you know, I plan to have more video conversations like this. So I'd like to just think of it as real conversations with real people, because that's what we're at, right? We're just real people. And, you know, we could all make a difference in some way. So God bless everyone. Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for coming in. Bye.
Thanks.